Welcome back to the Shared Practices podcast. George, how's it going?
Doing good, Richard. I'm excited to continue season two.
Season 2, we're back again after a little detour into season 1. We might go back there in another episode in the future. Something happened this last week that I'm really proud of, and that is you created a Facebook page for Shared Practices. And we've had a page, and now we have a group. And so why did we decide to do that? Why was that important to you?
Well, I think one thing that I've always tried to do is connect with our audience. And having this Facebook group has kind of allowed us to poll our audience, talk to them, see what their concerns are, and then guide content in that direction. And so that's really what I wanted to do. And then also discussing episodes. Like we had somebody post based on a specific episode, I had this question, and then it was a great discussion.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that I'm the most proud of out of everything was that just the awesome people that have shown up to the Facebook page, and the fact that we've attracted kind of this like-minded group of early ownership, business owners, business-minded dentists, like just people that I want to learn from and hang out with. And I feel like we've embodied that in this group. And our plan is to keep it not small, but limited to those who are pre-ownership or in the transition process or very early ownership, and not have it kind of flooded with a ton of different dentists focused on other things, but just our group of people going through this experience together. So it's been really cool to see that.
Yeah, I think it's important. Maybe size is not important, but it's just the quality of the group. And so I've been extremely happy with it so far. And anyone listening, please go ahead and add it. Just search facebook.com/shared practices, or we got a link in the show notes, and join the group and the discussion.
And if you're trying to join this group and I can't tell that you're a dentist, I'm not going to approve it. So make sure that it's kind of obvious on what's publicly displayed on your Facebook page that you're dental related. Otherwise, I'm going to deny it, because we don't want it full of random people. We don't want it full of people that we kind of don't know or trust that are kind of in the industry. Like I don't want it flooded with a bunch of people that are marketing to dentists that we don't know and trust already. So we're going to filter that for sure. But everyone is welcome who is listening to this podcast. We'd love to see you in there.
All right, Richard, how about we get to the show?
Okay. Justin Short is someone that I really respect and I've heard a lot about, and I was really excited to get to talk to. And this has turned into a little bit more than we initially expected it to. You now have kind of a relationship with Justin and our podcast as a whole. So tell me about that.
Well, listening to your interview and then talking to Justin, I contacted him. We started talking. I just was extremely impressed with him. And then, our friend of the show, Dr. Derek Williams, uses him as a consultant, a coach. And so kind of two things happened. One, I hired him as my coach.
Yeah.
And then the second being, we started a mini series where, I signed up for his course, and I took his course, and I thought, man, there's just so much great content. I asked him, and he agreed to go ahead and share it. So I think when you listen to this episode, I think you'll see the things that I saw that I really liked about Justin. And, hiring a coach is a personal decision. But, if you contact me and talk to me about it, I'd be more than happy to explain everything that I was thinking. It's just, I am really happy with the decision, and he's just such a bright guy.
Well, and it's awesome that both you hired him and that he agreed to do the mini series. One of the things is that I was trying to like pump him for specific content, and he gave me some specifics in the show, but I got the sense that like he has a specific way and recommendations of doing things across the board. And so in form of going in deep and really understanding things at a deeper level, you couldn't really hit all of the things that were important to him in just one episode. So that's why we decided to go through essentially a lot of his course online, and each course that he has, we're doing a corresponding episode to it. So if after this episode you're wanting more, don't worry. We've got some stuff coming down the pipeline, and it's going to be a whole bonus mini season, and we'll explain the format a little bit more later. So let's dive into the interview. Okay, I have with us today Dr. Justin Short, also known as the Lifestyle Dentist, or I guess your business is the Lifestyle Practice that you've got on the side. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I've heard of you. I think I actually first heard of you from like a Facebook ad that popped up like last September, October-ish. And I subscribed to your email list, which I've subscribed to and unsubscribed from quite a few email lists over time. And yours has been one that I've actually gotten a lot of value from, both the stuff that you write, and you've been doing some like interview format emails recently. Is that right?
Yeah. So I try to, it doesn't always work out that way. I try to about once a week, send out different content, but I always try to make it applicable because just like you, I hate getting the constant bombardment of emails that, that are just spammy. So, they're not always long. They're not always in depth, but, I try to be punchy and, send out something that I have found helpful in my own practice.
Well, I've appreciated that. And I highly recommend people go sign up for it. I think there was one, you interviewed Dr. Scott Luna pretty recently, maybe a month or two ago. And I remember in there it said, he said that people don't take enough time for stepping back and strategizing and kind of looking at the big picture and the value of that. And for what, I can't remember the exact quote, but for whatever reason, like the way he said it and the way you captured it really kind of impacted me. And I've tried to incorporate that more. So thank you.
No, it's been great. Yeah. So we did those interviews. I can't remember how many we did, but I'm actually writing a book with Dr. David Maloli of The Relentless Dentist.
Oh, no way.
And it's going to be called The Titans of Dentistry, how the top performers think and act differently. So we're just kind of started off that way and just kind of picking the brains of, some of the people that we follow, look up to. And, I'm sure there's a lot that there's only so many people we can put on that list.
Sure.
So I'm sure. But, just really
it's basically
trying to pick out their mindsets.
Oh, sorry. It's basically the Tools of Titans, Tim Ferriss style, but applied to dentistry. Right.
I mean, that's kind of where we got the idea. I was like, why don't we have this for dentists? So we're kind of just trying to pick out the mindsets, habits, routines, and just see if is there anything different? What do they do differently? And, see if we can get some good stuff from it.
That's awesome. I'm super excited. That big orange Tim Ferriss book is right on my bedstand right now. So it's good stuff. Well,
it's a big old book.
It's huge. Massive. You could hurt someone with that thing. Is that how big yours is going to be?
No, not at all.
I'm just kidding. Well, cool. Well, then I heard of you also through Derek Williams. Dr. Derek Williams has been on the show twice now, and his story is the most downloaded episode. I think we've got over 3,000 downloads on his From New Grad to Practice Ownership in 3 months. And
wow.
He was a big inspiration for me and for a lot of other people. We've been friends for a long time, and he really, really recommended kind of your coaching services. And so I started looking into more of your stuff, and I've listened to a couple of your episodes. You think you did an episode with Dr. Maloli as well as on Jonathan Van Horn's.
Yep.
And it seems like you're known for a couple things. Like one is that you've taken a couple practices and you've either doubled or tripled them while still living, or not living, but still only working 3 days a week.
Right.
That's pretty amazing.
Thank you. So been working with Derek since almost his first month in practice. I mean, obviously Derek's an outlier. He's a stud in many ways. So working with him has been easy and it's been a joy. But so I've had 2 practices, one in a small town outside of St. Louis, one in more affluent area, I'd say, around St. Louis, and have managed to build both of them up and still keep the schedule that I've always wanted to work, which is 3 days a week. I work Monday through Wednesday, 9 to 6, 9 to 6, 9 to 5. And we take about 8 to 10 weeks off. Some years it's been more off per year, and we do good numbers. And
I think
so. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think I assumed when I first heard that, I assumed that you were a fee-for-service model, which you're not. You're PPO, is that correct? Or mostly?
Right. I'd say we're about 70 to 80% PPOs.
Okay. And then I assumed that maybe he's got an associate, but you don't.
Right. No. So no associates. Have 5 team members. When we produce, this year we'll do right around 1.6 of collectible fees. That's not our UCR fees. That's our actual. I always put my PPO fees in our EagleSoft software because I don't ever want that false sense of security. Like, man, we're killing it today, and then realize at the end of the day, we can only collect 60 or 70% of that. So
I really like that, and I don't think that I could overstate the nuance of that. But instead of putting in the daily production, like, oh, we produced $4,000 or $3,000 of dentistry today, but really you're only going to collect from insurance, 2,500. Feeling good about that 3,000 is kind of pointless.
Exactly. And I sent out a weekly content a few weeks ago, like, just basically saying, like, stop fooling yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, just basically, just like I said, I don't want a false sense of security. If I'm not hitting the numbers I want to hit, I want to know. And I want to be pushed and be uncomfortable until I get to that level that, is my goal.
Do you just logistically, so how many different insurances do you accept total? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't, but I would say a lot.
Okay.
I handle none of my, when it comes to front desk stuff, like the logistics, I'm not good. Like, I couldn't file a claim in my lifetime.
Nice.
So
well, that's what a good front desk is for.
Exactly. So we have one front desk, and she's amazing. It makes my life much easier.
I guess the reason I was asking that was because it seems like you would have to know exactly what you can collect for each procedure for each insurance to be able to document it in your software that way.
Right. And it took some time. She put all those different fee schedules in there, which obviously took quite a bit of time. Yeah. But it was worth it to me in the end. It's paid off, and it just keeps us accountable, I'd say.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Okay, so you've got these two practices, and if people want to hear your journey of kind of how you went from one practice where you realized you got the second practice and it wasn't what you thought it was going to be to own two practices, your other two podcast interviews with Dr. David Maloley and Jonathan Van Horn go into that in depth. So I'm going to send people that direction. But is there anything that, if you could summarize that whole experience of being a multi-practice owner and then deciding to go back down to one, what would you tell people?
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, I would just point out that right now I've only, except for, I'd say, I think it was about a year and a half, maybe, I've always only owned one practice at a time. The main thing I would point out, kind of really what I worked with, Derek and I worked with, and I think he mentions it on your the podcast George just did with him, is, I think a lot of dentists now, I mean, let's be honest, it's kind of the sexy buzzword right now.
Totally.
It's like to have the multiple practices, and I think that's awesome. But I think you got to do you, and you don't have to have the multiple practices to be able to have a phenomenal income, number one, and number two, a fairly laid back lifestyle. And I don't say that to be cliche, but I mean, my life's much easier if I can make the same amount of income off one very well-run practice than managing 3 to 5 different practices to hopefully get up to that level.
Yeah, no, and it's absolutely kind of not countercultural. I would say like within, there's Dr. Mark Costes, who he's got his podcast and he's all about the multi-practice and breakaway practice. They're all about growing and building kind of this big thing. So to hear someone say, you know what, you can be very, very, very successful and have a lower mental stress and anxiety and cost of time and energy and effort if you really buckle down and optimize and design a single practice to be what it can be. I love that. And it really resonated with me when you said that. The other thing that I liked that you brought up when you were talking with Dr. Maloley was this idea of every single additional staff member is just a little bit more stress. And if you then move to multiple locations, that just compounds even further.
Right. And I think it just gets out of whack. And like I said, if I would have started out saying, multiple practices was my dream, or that if that morphed and that would become, I'm definitely not opposed to it. But I think I'm against people feeling like they have to do one or the other, to hit their goals and really fulfill the vision that they've set. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the other part of it, is that one of your big messages that you've talked about in the lifestyle practice, and the lifestyle practice. How would you describe kind of your side business of the lifestyle practice?
Sure. It's been a long road. So when I first started owning, or I first purchased my first practice, probably it's been about 11 and 12 years now.
Okay.
I hired a coach. I knew I had big goals, big dreams, and I knew I didn't have all the skills to hit those on my own. Or if I did, it would just be a much longer road to hoe. So I ended up hiring Bill Blatchford,
right,
of Blatchford Solutions. Still a great friend today. We still talk. Love him. I always, have nothing but great things to say to him about him. Things were going so well in my practice, he actually had me come back and work with some of his younger docs.
Nice.
So I did that for a while and just really enjoyed it. I love seeing that click, just like with Derek or any other clients where, that light bulb goes off and be like, wow, I really can, pretty much hit whatever goal I set. So I put it kind of on the back burner, had 3 kids and, bought another practice, et cetera, had life get in the way for a while, and then decided last year, like, you know what, there's never going to be a perfect time. Let's just do this. So I launched the lifestyle practice last year.
Right.
And then I have kind of 2 programs. One is all online. You sign up, you can download the modules and watch them on your computer at home, whatever. And then the others where clients get that, and we also work one-on-one together.
Okay.
So, and it's been a blast. I mean, Derek is I get to work with people like him, but there's a lot of other, quote, Derek's behind him.
Sure.
And, it's been a blast. I love it. And I hope to do a lot more of it as time goes on.
That's awesome. So this whole idea of the lifestyle practice, it's funny. There's 3 connotations of lifestyle that I think of, and I actually thought of one that you haven't mentioned or no one else has brought up in another podcast. I think of a lifestyle business, which is kind of this negative term in Silicon Valley for a startup that then instead of this scalable, growable Twitter or Facebook or Uber that can be sold off for, millions and billions of dollars, a startup turns into a business that can support 1 or 2 or maybe, 5 to 10 people, but it isn't going to scale and grow. And to investors in Silicon Valley, this is like a disappointment because these angel investors come in and they throw money at these companies and they want them to explode. They want them to blow up. So that was like the first thing that I thought of when I thought of the lifestyle practice was kind of that connotation. Have you gotten that from anyone before? Or?
Kind of. I think I agree. I think there's different connotations, and I think it's also, I'm not locked in to any one definition, but I think it has my approach or my thought process through it over the last year or so has morphed a little bit. I think, there's the idea of, one connotation that I hear, that I see, is that there's an element of, kind of lack of work or, possibly even like a laziness when you hear lifestyle,
So that's like the 4-hour work week lifestyle design type thing.
Right. And, kind of how I picture it is almost exactly the opposite, like putting in extraordinary amounts of work to then get to enjoy your life however it is. Like I'm a big believer, like when you see, the rewards, the outside rewards, the outside stuff, I think is always a direct result of the hard work put in on the inside, not the other way around. Like it took a lot of hard work to get my practice where it was doing what it is doing on autopilot, essentially. When I leave the office at Wednesday at 5:00, I don't really think about my practice until I show back up Monday at 9 a.m.
Yeah.
But that didn't come from laziness. That came from putting in the work early on in my career because I knew what I wanted my life to look like down the road.
Okay. So you said this, and I want to figure out how you help other people get there. So you said you figured out how you wanted your life to look like down the road. And I remember seeing on Dental Town someone who's like wanting to get out of dentistry and retire. Like they hated dentistry, they wanted to be done with it. And it started to get me thinking about like, what do I want to do in retirement? Because I'm a little bit of a workaholic, and that I like to always have something I'm passionate about that I can be working on. And I thought about it. And I was like, I kind of want to maybe be doing dentistry a couple days a week, but not have to do dentistry, and
Right.
then have side projects and other things I can work on, maybe education and teaching. And so then I thought, well, why do I have to wait until I retire to do that? What if you could do that earlier?
Right.
So how do you help someone figure out what they want their life to look like? What do most people think they want their life to look like? And where do you help them go with it?
Sure. I think from what I've realized from working with doctors is that I see a lot of doctors, dentists who kind of, when you that first knee-jerk response of, what do you want your life to look like? It's usually an answer of something that they think they can accomplish reasonably.
Okay.
Maybe they're taking a week or two of vacation. They're like, what would be great if I took 4 weeks of vacation?
Sure.
Like that's they're thinking big. And, it's kind of working with them and kind of peeling back the layers and saying like, okay, I don't want to hear what you think may be possible with a reasonable amount of work. Like if anything was possible, everything was on the table. What do you really want from life? What do you want to look like in 5 years, 1 year, 10 years? And then really pushing them just to think beyond what they think is possible at the moment. And then once we figure that out, and sometimes it's easy to figure out, and sometimes it takes time. And then we work backwards and say, okay, here's where we want to get to. And let's start from where you're at, from scratch, day one. And let's make a plan how we can get there. And I think usually it's surprising of how easily we can get there.
Okay.
I'm not saying easily as a lack of work, but usually it's not impossible by any stretch.
Okay. So what would be an example, and not that anyone should steal someone else's ideal lifestyle, but what would be an example of something that someone comes back to you and you feel like, okay, this is really what they want, and they feel like this is what I really want. I want like a concrete example that someone can like wrap their brain around.
Sure. Let's say one client lately, when we first started, he's working 5 days a week, and I think it was 1 or 2 Saturdays a month. And, we started off, and I was asking him like, where do you want to get through this process? And it started off, I really don't want to work Friday, or I really don't want to work Saturdays anymore.
Okay.
And I was like,
reasonably. Yeah.
Right. So definitely possible. Probably could have figured out on his own.
Sure.
But then talking through, it's like, okay, you have kids, right? Yeah, I have kids. How much time do you want to spend with them? Well, I'd like to spend a lot of time with them, more time with them than I am now. And then kind of, how much do you want to make? Well, I make XYZ now, and say 175,000. And it'd be awesome if I made 220,000. So, and it's kind of pushing like, so you're telling me that your end goal from this career is you want to work 5 days a week and you want to make 220,000. And like, first knee jerk again was, wow, that sounds pretty good. And then it's like, wait a second. Like, no, that's not what I really want. That's what I think I could do.
Right.
But that's not what I really want. So then we work through, and, I think it's been 5 months we've been working. Now he's down to 4 days a week, and income's going to be well over 300,000. And I think it's just the beginning. So it's, it's really pushing, just like the example you gave, just realizing like it's possible. You can have your cake and eat it too. What I see a lot of dentists believe in is that they can either have a good lifestyle and not kill themselves working at the office, 35, 40 hours a week, or they can have a really great income. But very few realize like, man, if I do the right things, I can have both. And that's what I come in and help. And there's zero agenda. Like lifestyle practice, like I don't go in and say, okay, this is what I want things to look like at the end of the day. Everyone's different. Everyone has different end goals. We figure out those goals, and then, like I said, we make a plan to get there. So we've been having great success.
That's awesome. Our mission at Shared Practices is to help you navigate the path to practice ownership. But one complaint that I've gotten, or one sentiment that I've heard, is that it's a seller's market right now, and it's hard to find practices, and practices fly off the shelf pretty quick. And so people say like, well, I can't own a practice because I can't find a good practice to buy. Like, I'm willing to go different places. I'm willing to expand my search, but I just can't find good practices. So George has found a way to bring some of these good practices to our attention. So George, share with us what you're doing now with these practices.
So I've reached out to brokers and I've searched nationwide for practice opportunities that fit the criteria that we discuss on the podcast for the kinds of things you're looking for. And so I went ahead and contacted all these brokers and I got these practices back, and I'm posting them to our listings page on our website in a way that only our listeners will know how to understand based on what we teach in the podcast. And I think it'll highlight the financial opportunities that are out there that other buyers may not notice.
So like things like profitability and hygiene ratios. Do we even have EBITDA on there?
I did EBITDA for every practice that's on there.
Awesome. And if they don't meet certain criteria, we're not going to list them. So we've already done a basic filtering for you. And if there's not a practice on there that's in your area, what are you doing about that, George?
Well, we're still growing. You know, it's definitely a work in progress to get all these opportunities up there. It's definitely a lot of my time. So if there's an area that you're interested in, email me and let me know where you're looking to buy and kind of when. And then I will go out and try to find something for you using our podcast as a ways to getting these practices and posting them online, and then obviously letting you know directly.
Awesome. And as a caveat, you still are going to have to do all of your own due diligence and understand and go through and have these looked at by professionals. But this is definitely providing our listeners with a phenomenal starting point of practices for them to potentially own and make offers on and move into practice ownership a whole lot sooner. So this is awesome. Thank you, George.
You're very welcome. I just thought this was a fantastic way to do a pre-screening and just knock out all of the things that we're not interested in based on what we teach on the podcast and really focus on the specific criteria. And that criteria is posted on that website. So just go to sharedpractices.com, click on practice opportunities on the upper right, and you'll see all of our listings. And the way that they're laid out is by financial information only.
Awesome. I love that idea that you could do both. You can have a great lifestyle. And I brought up the whole Silicon Valley example because I think that dentistry is by default a lifestyle business. Like, we can't scale naturally what we do. It is ultimately dependent on our two hands. And if you want to bring on an associate and go have multiple practices and build it, that is a massive undertaking. It doesn't occur naturally and has to have layers of systems and administrations versus kind of inventing a product and scaling that and selling that, or, you know, all these other types of businesses that lend themselves to kind of continued growth.
Right.
So why not take this lifestyle aspect of dentistry, the fact that you can make a really good income on a reasonable amount of time and effort, and maximize that idea. And so that's kind of I love that about what you teach and what you're helping people do.
Thanks. I think one key aspect you just hit on that I hear every week is dentists thinking they need an associate to scale back and increase income. And again, I knew in my practice, like right now, I mean, I'm only there 3 days a week. I have 4 days in this nice, beautiful office that no one's there. So people come up and, you know, other quote dental people, or even my parents, my dad is like, why do you have that practice, 4 days a week and no one's there doing stuff, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, at the end of the day, like, I built it enough where my income's at a great level. Yeah. I have very little stress. It's what I want. And I think dentists, not that there's anything wrong with associates. I have clients that have associates, but the idea that I have to have an associate if I want to take more time off or raise my income is baloney.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's bring this back to the kind of the season of the podcast. We're talking about acquisitions. How would knowing this, and I'm going to make an assumption, and you tell me if this assumption is wrong. My assumption is that in order to do this, you really have to be a practice owner. It's kind of hard it would be hard to control all of the systems, staff, culture, vision, implementation of this, and really get to that endpoint that you really want if you're not the boss. Is that a fair assumption to make?
I think that is a fair. I think it's a fair assumption. I think it would definitely be harder.
It would be harder.
Right.
And there could be an ideal associateship relationship, partnership relationship that works out just great, but it would be maybe a little bit easier to leverage some of these principles if you're in charge of everything.
Sure.
Okay. So we're taking someone who wants to be a practice owner, and they want to acquire a practice with the end in mind of doing what you've got right now. What kind of practice should they be looking for? Does it matter? I mean, this can be done and this can be implemented to some extent in any type of practice.
Right.
But if you could look for a practice with this idea in mind, what would you be looking for?
Yeah, I think it could be done with any type of practice. Let me preface by saying that. I think with any practice acquisition, obviously there are certain things, you want to be looking for regardless if you're going to pursue your wildest dreams or not.
Sure.
So, and I think those are fairly universal. I can say what I would be looking for.
Okay, let's do that. I like that.
Number one, I mean, I want to figure out first where I want to be, or at least the general area. I mean, to me, it wouldn't be worth if I knew I could bring home twice as much money, but I got to be in rural BFE,
sure,
blah, blah, blah. To me, it wouldn't be worth it. So number one, I want to get an idea of what part of the country I want to practice in. Then I would be looking for someone, a dentist who has been scaling back for a while.
Okay.
Fee for service would be great, but it's definitely not a necessity. If I had two exact practices doing the same amount, everything else is exactly the same. One was fee for service, one was PPO dependent. Obviously, I think the wiser choice would be fee for service.
Okay. And the thing that the worry that I have whenever I hear of buying a fee for service practice is that it won't transfer as well. But I guess all of the systems to your staff that could maintain a fee for service practice, hopefully would be there in place and maintain that relationship, and you wouldn't lose as many patients. Whereas the PPO, patients are maybe a little bit more likely to stay with you. Have you seen that either way? I haven't seen enough fee for service acquisitions to know.
Usually I find it, I think I've seen it almost lean towards the other way around.
Okay, sure.
That I see the fee for service patients sticking, because usually, if it's fee for service, they've made that conscious decision that's not based on insurance or something like that.
Okay.
To go to that office. And I think usually just locations, it's not always the case. I mean, you can find those amazing fee for service practices in more saturated areas, but a lot of times I think they're in a little bit less saturated areas.
Okay.
Where I think there's less choice. And I think if you do the right things during the transition, which you should do regardless if you're purchasing PPO or fee for service,
right,
that attrition should be severely minimized. I mean,
okay.
I purchased two practice, one fee for service, one not. And I think going in, people are people.
Yeah.
You got to go in, win them over, look them in the eye, say, thank you for sticking with us during this transition. If there's anything I can do, here's my cell phone. There are certain things you got to do regardless.
Which practice was your fee for service purchase and which one was your PPO?
My fee for service was my first practice.
Okay.
In the little bit more rural areas of the town, I think it was around maybe 7,000 at the time.
Okay.
And that was fee for service. There's only 4 other dentists in the town. And it was good. And then I moved to the more affluent area. I'll be short because I know this is kind of a tangent.
No, this tangent is super interesting to me because I know that you sold off that first practice and kind of moved into the second practice with a more affluent area. And my assumption was the other way around. It was more affluent, and so it'd be more fee for service, and the other one was more rural and it'd be less fee for service. But you've flipped that assumption. So I'm actually kind of interested in, over time, how much of that original fee for service versus insurance mix, did you maintain that same level of insurance versus fee for service, or did you take on more insurance as you grew it? Kind of when you sold it, what was the mix?
Sure. When I sold the first one, really nothing had changed. It was fee for service, and we took Delta Premier.
Okay.
And when I sold it 5 years after I purchased, it was the same setup.
Okay.
With the newer practice, so I moved from this little, what a lot would consider like podunk town, to this really nice area, St. Louis. And, most people, like my friends and family and stuff, are like, oh, I know why you did that, because you're just going to make a lot more money where all these, people with more money live.
Yeah.
And I told them, it was like, it's exactly the opposite. Because, there is more competition. There are more people with more jobs in the big, quote, Fortune 500 companies, whatever, with good insurance.
Sure.
Where that just wasn't the case. So for me, it was really 100% opposite. It was definitely more of a challenge to go into the more saturated area that took all the insurances. I don't know. We might have added a few since I purchased back in 2009.
Okay.
But really have kept it pretty much the same. I mean, my goal wasn't to, just get on every little plan we could, but I also didn't want to lose. I think you can do really good as a PPO practice. I don't think that has to really limit your growth potential or income at all.
That's awesome. Okay. I mean, and that your example, I know it's just two practices. We have a sample size of 2, but to see that you did this a little bit more rural with fee for service, and now you're doing this in a more affluent PPO environment with more competition. Just that right there. I love the fact that you could do both of those, make both of those successful, grow both of them, and still have 3 days a week of dentistry that you're doing. So, okay, cool. So going back to what we were talking about what would you look for in a practice? So we said maybe an older doc that had been scaling back a little bit, kind of like Derek's situation where there's a lot of undone crown and bridge and other work. He's been doing a lot of maybe just getting patients by, a lot of patchwork, being not very aggressive in treatment planning. I'm not saying that people should be aggressive, but there was a lot on the table there.
Sure. Yeah, I thought one of my favorite things from that podcast, it's really something that I learned when George was talking about the crown to 3 to 4 surface filling ratio.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I thought that was amazing. And I'm planning on stealing that as much as I can, because that was such great advice. And if I had to do it all over again, just from hearing that podcast just now, I would totally be looking at that ratio.
Yeah.
I think Derek's, he walked into a good thing where I think George said his ratio was like 300 to the 100 or something.
Yeah, and just to recap for anyone who hasn't listened to those episodes, basically George brought up this ratio of 3 to 4 surface fillings to crowns, and according to Heartland, a normal-ish range for them was 100 crowns for about 80 3 to 4 surface fillings, and Derek's practice was 100 crowns to 310 3 to 4 surface fillings. So you could just get the very visceral sense of okay, they're doing a lot of big old fillings that are just getting the patient by. And that number was a gold mine for him.
Right. And I think a couple things from that. Number one, I mean, obviously, I think a lot of new young dentists, especially right out of school, would have gone in and considered that same trend. If you don't know how to talk to patients and go from A to Z, from a practice that they've been used to coming in, getting something patched with a huge amalgam and be out the door in 20 minutes versus, someone who has learned the skills, put the time in to learn how to talk to them and get them, get that mind shift while still building and protecting that rapport with being the new guy. I mean, that's definitely a lot of skill goes into that. And I think that's what definitely.
I was going to say, I think Derek did a great job in this last episode with George of describing kind of all the ways of presenting photos and having his team on board with this and really helping the patients arrive at this conclusion and doing it in a supportive way, not salesy. And that's a lot of finesse that he had to really maximize that opportunity rather than coming in and aggressively treatment planning and scaring off a bunch of patients because he's just trying to sell them on crowns.
Exactly. And I remember, I think back to Darren. We had several conversations. He would call me up and be like, what do I do when someone comes in with blah, 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 blah? Like that same thing. Got a mouthful of work that they need. I'm the new guy. What do I say? Or how do we approach this? And we worked through that. And he put in the time and work. And, I'm so happy for him to see it pay off. Just hearing him, I know you guys commented on just the change in his voice and demeanor from, the first podcast you guys did with him. I pictured him like sitting there with pulling out his hair. This one, he's sitting back, big pimping and, you could just tell he's much more at ease. And I could, I've seen Derek, put in the time and work. He has the goal. We know we wanted to get this school that paid off. And over time, things have changed from, hurried from, he's become quick, but not hurried anymore. He's become instinctive more opposed to impulsive, making these decisions. And just seeing him transform into this stud of a practice owner it's been a great joy to watch. But going back to your question, I would look at that ratio now. I also liked looking at are we staying up to date on full mouth series, panos, stuff like that? Because that tells me, again, are they diagnosing? Are they getting the full picture to diagnose what they need to diagnose? I would look for, the main thing I look for is potential. I think everything else, like, I could go in there and change. And again, this is me or a client. The main thing I would look for potential, because everything else I feel like we could go in and rock house on. Okay.
And would you say that when it comes to potential, you'd be looking for a practice that's maybe $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 collections range versus a smaller practice or a bigger practice? What speaks to you in terms of potential? I know it's so multifactorial. It's hard to kind of put a bow on that.
Yeah, I would. Great question. I would probably lean towards that $600,000 to $800,000 range.
Okay.
But that's just me.
Yeah.
I think, like when my practice, when someone comes in and purchases my practice, maybe there's going to be a little bit less low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
But it's a well-oiled machine.
Sure. They're buying the cash flow.
Right. You're buying the cash flow. You're buying the team that has been trained extensively and makes your life easier. So really, I think it depends on, if I was fresh out of school, I'd be going and looking for potential. If I had been doing it for a while and I knew, I could go in and replicate a high producing practice and it would take a little bit of the legwork off me, then, I'd probably be looking for a more established practice that's well run.
Okay, let's get into some other specifics that are kind of your style. So we're putting aside all of the other ways that you could do this. But let's say someone wanted to replicate this 3-day a week, getting up to that $1.2 to $1.5 million range. How many operatories and how many team members do you operate at currently? And what would you be looking for in an acquisition in terms of those two things?
For most of my career, I had 3 to 4 employees and 3 ops.
Okay.
I only had 3 ops until the end of 2014. So we're 2.5 years now where I've been at 5 ops. My first practice and the second practice I purchased before I moved locations in 2014, both had 3 ops, both had 3 staff for most of that. Okay. 1 hygienist, 1 front desk, 1 assistant. I noticed with the 3 operatory system, me personally, we were plateauing in that 1.2 to 1.3 range.
Okay.
But, I don't think there's any, again, doesn't necessarily, it all goes back to what you want, because with only 3 team members in a smaller office space,
your overhead's lower.
Our overhead was low 40s.
Holy cow.
So, it was great.
Yeah.
So we jumped up to, the 5. Now I have 5 team members, 5 operatories. And, and now we do 1.6. Our overhead's right around 50%.
Okay.
So it's not a huge difference in income.
Yeah.
I think it's a huge difference because I knew I wasn't going to be practicing until I was 60 or 70.
Yeah.
So building up that practice is going to do more for me when it's time to sell.
So that was a strategic choice, not just kind of cash flow lifestyle in the meantime, but also building this up as an asset as part of your eventual kind of departure from dentistry.
Exactly.
Okay.
But I think instead of the question being like, what do you think is like the best, most optimal? I personally don't think there is.
Okay.
What I would say is don't get overstaffed, because that is the biggest thing I see dentists getting in trouble, that makes it much harder to make the high income and have the lifestyle. I mean, if your staff overhead is 30+%, I mean, that's a big chunk. You've got a lot of mouths to feed. And, ours is locked in at 20%. It always has been for both my practices. It's not going to go higher. It's not going to go lower. So when you can do that, that's my biggest thing, is encouraging docs. What happens is they get a little bit busy, get busier and busier. Staff starts to complain, or they don't want to work as hard. So what do we do? Let's throw somebody else in the mix.
Sure. Get someone else who doesn't want to work as hard.
Right. Exactly. And I didn't have 2 assistants until June of last year. So it's still been less than a year that I've had 2 assistants, just because I knew, I didn't feel like we had reached capacity with 1 assistant yet.
Sure.
And again, we were,
which sounds crazy to me. Like, it seems like that'd be so easy to hit, but if you're really maximizing everything, I guess not.
What we're going to talk about today is the integration of Spear online patient education videos into your case presentation process. And I'm going to start by talking about some survey results that we had done by an independent company. The reason we did the survey is because we have been creating these videos to help dentists with patient education, and we wanted to know, number one, were they perceived as effective by patients, but also we wanted to know, had these patients actually been shown other videos in their treatment and practices. And interestingly enough, 9% of those surveyed had been shown a video, and 91% of those who'd been shown a video thought that it actually impacted them in a positive way to do treatment. So much so that of the ones that had actually watched a video, 72% actually started the procedure within the next month. In addition to the survey, we did live focus groups where we had an independent company, again.
That was a course called A Research-Driven Approach to Case Presentation by Dr. Frank Spear. If you want access to this full course and to see what their research revealed on how to approach case presentation, sign up for speareducation.com, request a 30-day guest pass, and then use the promo code LOW200 for $200 off your annual membership. Not only will you receive access to this course and their research, but you'll also receive access to their entire library of patient education videos, which you can use in your office.
Exactly. So we added that new assistant in June of last year, and our production jumped big. I mean, we had one of our biggest months last year. I think it was $157,000 the first month that we had 2 assistants.
So that for you was a sign that you made the right decision.
Right. It showed me I was correct in assuming that we're getting to the point where we had some pent up capacity.
Okay.
I always want to make sure that I want my practice to prove to me we have to add somebody else. So many times, I hear, I'd say more than 3 times a week, every week, doctors emailing, they're doing 6 to 800,000, and they already have 2 people up front. I mean, and I tell them, like, hey, we do, and I'm not rubbing it in anyone's face. I get it. You don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
I was like, if I can run a $1.6 million practice with 1 person up front, there's no reason why you need 2 doing 700.
Do you have that front desk person there on the Thursday, Friday that you're not there?
They're there. All my staff, my whole team works till about 3:00 on Thursdays when I'm not there.
Okay.
Other than that, we don't have anybody answering the phones the rest of the day. Thursday, all the way back to Monday.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. And it obviously isn't holding you back. So
no, we put systems in place. We build things up so that we can still hit the numbers we want to hit while not having to have someone on call, 24/7. My front desk takes all my emergency calls. So we have someone doing that.
Okay.
But, we just decided we don't need it.
Okay. So now let's say that someone does the acquisition. They're in Derek's position of there's so much I could optimize. I could work on our financial side of things. I could work on case presentation. I could work on the phones and scheduling and marketing. I could work on, clinical mix and adding more things to the mix and learning more procedures. It can be overwhelming to decide where to start.
Sure.
Where would you advise someone if they wanted to start moving towards this, working fewer days, higher profit? Where would you start? Where do you look at the low-hanging fruit?
I would have them start with calling Justin short.
Right.
The lifestyle. No. Honestly, it's really hard to say. I would say all the above.
Okay. That's the theme I've gotten, is that from listening to you talk to other people, is that you can't pull this off if you're not doing everything right, more or less.
Right. I think everything has to improve. And I don't think there's one silver bullet. If your marketing can be great, but if they're getting a horrible experience when they come in the door, well, you're just peeing your money away.
Sure.
And there's plenty of yin and yang for different things. But it's not that hard. But I think the whole, your whole game has to be raised. And I'm not just saying it, someone doesn't have to call me, call someone else who you trust. But I think the easiest way to get to a place you want to get to is find someone who's done it and learn what they do and then do the exact same thing. Like, there's no way in heck I would go in and try to reinvent the wheel and do it all myself again. If I was, if I had one of my kids was going to become a dentist and, they had big goals and wanted a big life and freedom and whatever that entails for them, I would 100% say, find a coach, find a mentor. A good one is more than well worth their money.
Okay.
When I first hired Blatchford, 11 years ago, it cost me, I think it was $50,000 plus.
Holy cow.
For the year. And I didn't have that. My friends who were just out of school with me thought I was crazy.
Sure.
But learning that early on, it's made an amazing difference in my whole entire life. It's night and day, but everyone, no one wants to spend a few bucks to learn how. I'm going to figure it out on my own. But in the end, if it takes you 10 times as long, you're losing money.
Well, and then there's the figuring it out, and then there's the implementation. And if you know where you want to go, and someone else has already taken that journey, and this comes back to knowing your vision. It comes back to knowing what you want. If you want to have multiple practices, then you don't hire Justin Short. You go find someone who's doing this. You go get Dr. Hunter Smith and replicate his model and hire him as a coach. If you want one practice with a small staff, and if you want to cut back, then someone hires you. But to implement and to have coaching and feedback and accountability and knowing, you think that you're doing it right, but actually you're implementing this part of it wrong, and that's where it was holding you up. Right. That's the truly valuable part in my mind.
Sure. And life's short, and you can end up costing yourself a lot of time, and you can definitely shortcut the process, speed up the process, immensely by having the right strategic partner.
Okay. So you kind of sidestepped my question of where to start. Sorry. Because it was a general question, and fair enough. So I got a general answer. Let me try this another way to see if I can get some more out of you.
Sure.
What would be, think of 2 or 3 specific clients that have made some changes that made a bigger difference. Like what are some specific things that clients have taken right off the bat working with you and implemented those in their practice, either systems or mindset shifts or coaching in a specific area? What has made the biggest difference for people right up front?
Sure. Number one, I'd say for me, mindset always trumps systems.
Okay.
I think your mindset will always limit the wrong mindset will always limit you more than the wrong systems. If you have the right mindset, usually the systems follow. So that would be number one. Number two, and it also could be number one, is leadership. You have to be the leader in your office. You get what you tolerate. If you can't build a practice that's a 10 with a team of 7s. And you have got to lead them. If you have the right people, you have got to teach them and lead them and train them to be what you need to be in order to hit your vision and goals. And there's so many times that dentists either A, don't know how to do that, or B, don't want to do that because it's not fun. You know, when I took over this practice that I'm working at now, my second practice, when I started, it was at the end of 2010, and it had produced 425,000 on the doctor working 16 days a month, 4 days a week. I went in and I trained with my team every week. You know, I would mark off half the day on Thursday. We would train day in or week in, week out. And then eventually it went to every month. And then it went to quarterly. And now we meet twice a year to really go over things. But very few dentists want to put in that time. And I'd say there's an amount also that don't know how to do that, don't know how to train.
Yeah. I was gonna say, you know, I think a lot of people want to be better leaders, but they don't know what they're doing wrong, or
Right.
People want to be better trainers, but they don't know how to train effectively, or people are good trainers, but they don't know what to train. So that there's a couple different factors there.
Right. And, you know, those are the first two areas I start with all my clients: mindset and then leadership. You've got to become a leader. Then I'd move on to rapport building skills. You know, either books, podcasts, again, a mentor, something that is going to help you build those case presentations and rapport building skills. Because really, at the end of the day, that's what it all comes down to. You know, are you able to get these patients, whether they're just new to you because you're the new dentist, or they're just new patients coming to that office, are you able to get them to know, like, and trust you in a short amount of time, so where they feel comfortable accepting the treatment that will inevitably help them get healthier? The more people you can help, the more successful you're going to be.
Okay, so how do you do that quickly? I mean, that's something that I struggle with. I'm in the Army, so my patient base doesn't have to pay for treatment, so it's great. But I still like building that rapport. But I end up, because I can spend some more time with these patients, I end up spending a little bit more time, you know, getting to know them and figuring out what they want, especially if we're doing big, complex treatment plans like we're doing in my residency. So how do you go in and within 2 to 3 minutes go from nice to meet you to, okay, let's move forward with this expensive treatment plan?
Sure. I think, and I definitely don't want to sidestep your question, but there's so much that goes into it.
I know.
I'll try to shorten it up as best as I can.
Okay.
While still giving something of some value.
Yeah.
But, you know, number one, in our office, we believe that process starts from the first time they call our office.
Okay.
You know, I'd say this is just one little small thing that we do, but that I think the small things add up to big things. When a new patient calls, no matter who answers the phone, who schedules the appointment, we always say something good about someone else in our office. Like, you know, Mrs. Lowe, you're going to be seeing Amanda for your cleaning. She gives the best cleanings. You're going to love her. Or, you know, Mr. Jones, you called the right office. You're going to love Dr. Short. He takes great care of all of our patients. Something, because people purchase because of other people, you know, whether it's referral or they see that social validation via your reviews, or they've heard something good about you. You know, only 20% buy on because you have a great advertising flyer.
Right.
But I think we spend, you know, 80% of our time on that flyer and only 20% working on that big 80% of what really converts treatment.
Well,
you know,
this ties right in with what you were saying on the other show about making patients feel good about themselves. So right. this was one specific. Another specific that you gave was that you always try and have the patient leave the office feeling better about themselves rather than just feeling better about your practice. Why is that? How do you do that, and why do you do that?
Because I think that, if you have people in your life that always uplift you, make you feel better, you're drawn to them. That makes you like them. And essentially, I use the example of my grandmother, and I used it in the other podcast. But
yeah,
every time I loved her. We got along. I was, like I said, I think I was her favorite, but that's up for discussion. But every time I left her house, I felt better about myself because I knew she cared about me, and she just made me feel better about myself. And that translates into, with the patients, making them know, like, and trust you more. If they leave with that feeling subconsciously of, man, these people really cared about me, or they really made me feel good.
Yeah.
We never hesitate. We don't make stuff up, but we never hesitate to say, hey, you look really nice today, or something else that's a little bit of a stretch as far as dental office talk.
Sure.
To get into the personal, I'll ask them, like, how was your weekend? What'd you do this weekend? Or, I love those shoes. Something goofy, and I don't make it up. If I hate their shoes, I will not say I like their shoes.
Yeah.
But there's nothing off limits, as far as that type of conversation in our office. But another thing, and I give a ton of examples, when working with people, but, I always want to go in and join the party, however that patient is. If they're quiet, I'm going to, I want to kind of mimic whatever they are. I think that's a time-tested technique. If they're loud joking, I'm going to go in there and joke right back with them. If they're more quiet, reserved, I'm going to keep my distance a little bit, talk a little quieter.
If they're in a rush, if they're an executive and they just want to know how much it costs and get it done, that's what you do.
I always want to go in and join the party, whatever that party is. There's literally probably 50 or 100 things that go into being able to build that rapport quickly.
Well, those specific examples, those three little examples right there, show how this really is leadership, to be able to figure out, okay, we need to be able to build rapport, but now you need to get your team on board, and your team has to believe and be able to execute on these beliefs of making the patient feel good about themselves, about complimenting another patient. And I can see how you say leadership over systems, or relationships over systems, because if you just built these really good systems that were scripted and they got to follow the system, and your staff is like, okay, we're doing this system now and I got to plug into this. That's a whole different feel than this general principle of making the patients feel good about themselves, complimenting someone else on the team. But they are systems. There's specifics that they're doing, but there's a whole reason behind those systems.
Right. And, I think, and it may be this same, a different word for the same thing, but, I think it's a principled approach, where people who are looking to maybe get some coaching or work with me, they'll ask, like, why does this work here in New York and, in rural Texas?
Sure.
And it's because there's principles. People are the same regardless. And if you learn the principles and you have a team that can execute on those principles, it makes your life much, much easier.
Well, and having them buy in and having them understand what you want, and that feel, it seems so frou-frou. It feels so like intangible and like, really, this is what makes the difference. But it seems like it really does matter across the board.
No, 100%. That's why, we cover systems, but again, for me, always mindset trumps your systems.
Well, maybe we'll have to have you back on training and leadership and team building and do a whole episode, if you're willing, on how to do that, how it's done wrong, how to get your team to see your vision, how to decide what your vision is within a practice, and how to treat people, if you're willing. And then I also want to get you back. I'm planning on maybe doing a mini season on investing, and you've got 60 residential real estate properties, and I got my realtor's license in dental school, and I'm a huge fan of bigger pockets and all this other stuff. So that's my eventual goal, but I don't want to buy a bunch of properties scattered throughout the U.S. as we finish up our Army commitment. So would you be willing to come back for another episode or two?
Absolutely.
Cool. Awesome. This has been really, really good for me. I've been able to see kind of how you think, and it's a mindset shift that I wasn't expecting to have during this episode. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all this.
Sure, my pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
All right, thank you.
Bye. George, obviously you liked that interview because you hired him as a coach, but what stood out to you about that interview?
Well, I think for me, it was just the kind of the comprehensive picture that it's the entire practice that really has to improve to accommodate that lifestyle that he's known for and is able to achieve that to some is really unbelievable.
Yeah. And I liked how he talked about this idea that it's not about being a lazy dentist. You're not like, oh yeah, I'm just like the lifestyle dentist. I just kind of only work a little bit and I make a ton of money. It's really easy. Which is kind of what you think of when you think of like the 4-hour work week, Tim Ferriss. But instead, it's all about this engineering your life and your practice on purpose to live the lifestyle that's possible and elevating that vision to that point. So for me, it changed. It has definitely shifted my perspective. I was the multi-practice, like, yeah, I definitely want like 2 to 3 practices and I'll be the specialist for those practices. I'll kind of do the implants and maybe molar endo because that's stuff I love for my residency. And now I'm leaning more towards a much leaner, much smaller practice that I can keep at a 3-day schedule and have time for podcasting and real estate and coaching or whatever I want to do down the line, having opportunities to do that because my practice affords me to do that. So it was definitely a beneficial episode for me and my overall vision and goals.
Absolutely. And if you could kind of listen to some of the questions Richard was asking in the interview, you could kind of get the sense of Justin that it just required more than with the time we had to answer those questions. And that's really what sparked this whole idea of doing the mini season with Justin. You know, there was a few things he asked me. He was like, well, you know, I can't really give you an answer now that would not take us past the time we have. You know what I mean?
Well, and so I haven't heard these recordings yet. You've done a few of the recordings with Justin. So like, what are some of the things that you guys are getting into that would require more time?
Well, for one, you know, we talk about dealing with staff, we talk about leadership, we talk about metrics and scheduling, you know, just a lot of things that are really heavy topics that you can't really just in a couple sentences or, you know, 4 or 5 minutes answer enough of them. And so it's just his whole philosophy. We really take it, you know, his whole course, like we talked about in the intro, has all these, his whole course has all these individual modules. And so we go through each module in a whole episode. And it's formatted a bit different than I think a regular podcast, which is very fluid with conversation. Okay. You know, we have a curriculum, and so it takes time for us to get through it, and it feels like we're teaching more than we're talking. And I think that's good. You know, we're really getting a lot of information across.
I'm excited. I haven't heard it yet, so I'm really excited to actually listen to it all myself. And I think from your reactions, you're pretty excited to share this with our audience.
Absolutely. And, you know, if anybody knows what it's like, I don't think anybody knows what it's like to do 11 interviews with somebody. But, it gets a little goofy. We spend a lot of time together. It'll be every Tuesday until we're done. So however many weeks that ends up being. We're about halfway through it right now, so I don't know what the end looks like, but we've had a lot of fun. Look forward to it this Tuesday and every Tuesday afterwards until it's done.
Awesome. Thank you so much, George. We'll talk with you next time.